So, ILNS is a registered charity supporting persons with disabilities to make informed choices about how they want to live their lives. Today's session is about creating an inclusive environment. We're going to talk about what it means to be an inclusive workplace. We're going to talk about some disability etiquette and some language. We're going to talk about effective leadership and inclusivity. We're going to talk about strength-based approaches and also consequences of not being inclusive. And then at the end, we're going to reflect on how inclusive our organizations are. So the goal of these sessions is always to advocate for and discuss ways to support people with disabilities to find lasting and meaningful employment, and to educate and support employers in adapting to changing workplace cultures and accommodating diversity. So the theme of today is very much this, what's become really a slogan of the disability community and other marginalized communities as well, which is just nothing about us without us. Just like other minority groups in society, persons with disabilities are often not included in policies that are created and are often overlooked and not discussed or consulted when policies are created. In a province with 30% of the population identifying as people with disabilities, shouldn't we be including their voices to the conversations that we're having? And it's really important to keep this in mind when we're voting and when we're talking about our management, but also our government. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further as well. So just a quick review. So we want to ensure that hiring people with disabilities is part of the company's overall hiring plan. Conduct targeted outreach to attract qualified candidates with disabilities and make the application process accessible. Successful recruitment efforts can be built through collaboration with community-based partners such as nonprofit organizations and local employment programs that have connections to qualified candidates. These service providers can also assist with the new hire on an ongoing basis to ensure successful transitions to employment. And we want to make sure we have workplace policies that are inclusive and diverse, and accommodations are accepted and implemented. So, what do I even mean when I talk about an inclusive work culture? It means the employer welcomes diversity and inclusion and is looking for a way to create a more diverse and inclusive workplace. The employer includes people with disabilities and treats them equally alongside other employees. So remember, nothing about us without us. When you're creating these policies and you're not sure, ask your employees how they want to be represented in any policy changes. The employer is comfortable providing accommodations to all employees, and the employer focuses on performance and individuals rather than their disabilities. So there are a few changes that you can implement now to be more inclusive today. Ask and listen carefully to what your employees say that they need. Practice courageous conversations. Be the person in your organization that's willing to have the conversation about the hard stuff, the awkward stuff, and the stuff that is too much information. Assess your workplace with clear eyes and make necessary adjustments. Think about universal design and the well-being of all of your employees. So how can we make changes now so that in the future, when we have a candidate who has a disability, we already have an inclusive workplace for them to join? For example, if the entrance to your building requires climbing stairs, you could add a ramp that's easy to find and use, or update any existing accommodations to make sure that they're easily accessible. You want to model a corporate culture that's sensitive to the needs of people with disabilities and also shows a willingness to make those accommodations and have those conversations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about language. Language is changing a lot, even in the last 5, especially 10 years. We're changing the way that we refer to persons with disabilities. And so I'm going to go over all of that really clearly, but I want to start with what we call identity first language. Now, this is the most current way to identify persons with disabilities. It basically outlines that the person's disability is part of them. It's a defining factor for them, just like they would say, I'm a Canadian. Disability is the social experience of exclusion based on an impairment. So if a person has a mobility impairment and has difficulty using stairs, but they live in a town with no stairs, they're not disabled. Persons with disabilities see their disability as part of themselves. It's not good or bad or anything. It's just a characteristic of their personality. It's a meaningful component of a person's identity, and it defines the ways in which an individual experiences and understands the world around them. They cannot separate their disability from themselves. That's the only way that they see and experience the world. Language is evolving, as I said, and some people with disabilities may prefer identity first language. So for example, some people prefer person with autism, which is what we call person first language, which we're going to talk about. But some people may prefer to be called an autistic person. So again, someone may want to be called a person with a disability, or they may prefer disabled person. Only by asking can you know which they're comfortable with. Simply ask, how do you like to identify? Most people with disabilities are going to be very receptive. It may seem like it's an awkward kind of question to ask, but most folks are actually happy that you would rather learn the way that they want to be addressed. This is also really key. Identity first language is also really key for other marginalized communities, like the LGBTQ plus community, right? We want to be asking people how they like to identify. You also want to mirror the language that the person uses to identify themselves. So if you're in an interview with someone and they say, I'm an autistic person, well, great. Now you know it's okay to refer to them as an autistic person. That's actually what they prefer. So when we say autistic person, for example, we recognize, affirm, and validate an individual's identity as an autistic person. So person first language is what we've been using, hopefully. And again, we are moving more towards identity first language, but I wanted to keep this slide in here because I think that a lot of people are still using person first language, and it is acceptable. And I want to be really clear about what is not acceptable. So if we're looking at the left side where we have a green check mark, things that are okay to say if you're using person first language. And then on the right, I have a column of things that we want to avoid saying. So these things are no longer recognized in the disability community as a respectful way to refer to a person with a disability. So I'm going to go over a few of them that are really key. So again, disabled person instead of mentally challenged. So we really want to avoid this. And the reason that I'm bringing these up is because I actually do hear them quite often when I'm out in community and talking to employers. And, you know, it's just my job to inform people about the right language to be using now. So disabled person or person with a disability. Person suffering from mental illness is one that I hear a lot. We want to be really careful about when we're referring to any kind of disability as a suffering. People with disabilities really don't, that's just, it's something that they have to live with. Again, it's part of their identity. It's not something that they're suffering from. It's not a bad thing. We want to kind of take away this negative association with disability, right? Person who has a hearing impairment or person with a hearing impairment is the correct way to refer to someone who is deaf. Person who uses a wheelchair or person confined to a wheelchair. This one I hear quite a bit. Want to refrain from, again, any negative association with the disability. So a person isn't confined to a wheelchair, right? They use a wheelchair. Person with a visual impairment instead of blind person, unless of course with identity first language, some blind people are kind of reclaiming that and want to be called a blind person, but generally what we want to say person with a visual impairment. And again, short statured person would be the correct language. If you don't know, it's okay to ask. Just ask, how do you identify, or again, mirror the language that they're using. And we just want to refer to the person first and then their disability. So we're going to go into some disability etiquette, but before I get into the nitty gritty, I want to go over just a few things that are really basic, just general. So again, asking the person. So adults with disabilities want to be treated as independent people. When a person with a disability wants help, ask them, how can I help you, before you just assume that what you're doing is helping. Speak to the person directly. This happens a lot and it is really hard, but people do have support people that come with them, or sign language interpreters, for example. We want to make sure that we're speaking directly to the person and not to their support person or through their support person necessarily. We want to be sensitive about physical contact. So anybody who uses a mobility device, we want to avoid touching that mobility device unless they ask. People with disabilities consider their equipment part of their personal space. Don't make any assumptions. I think something I'm hoping everyone gets from these sessions is that disability is so unique to the individual. So we don't want to make any assumptions. People with disabilities are the best judges of what they can and cannot do, and they will be able to tell you or demonstrate their abilities for you. It's really important not to make an assumption. And respond to requests. When someone asks for an accommodation in the workplace, it's not a complaint. They're not saying that they don't want to do the work or being lazy. They're saying that it's something that they need. And it shows that the person feels appreciated and has confidence in your understanding. It's actually a good thing if your employee comes to you with an accommodation, because it means that they don't want to just leave. They want to continue to work for you, and they feel like you're an approachable and inclusive employer, that they can ask for that and that it will be accommodated. So some specific disability etiquette. People who use service animals are not just people who are blind, which is normally the kind of assumption that people make, but some people who are deaf or have just reduced vision, or who have had a traumatic brain injury, a seizure disorder, or a range of other disabilities may use a service animal to assist them with daily living. It's important that we don't touch the service animals without permission. And within a business, this means that a no animal policy would need to be modified to allow the person to enter with a service animal in mind. And inclusive workplaces will have designated spaces for service animals. And that doesn't mean, a specific room or whatever, but it just means that if the employee has a service animal, they have a space in their office or near their desk that the animal can lie in, like a bed or be comfortable and have some food and water. We also want to think about if someone's working at 8 hours in an office building on the 10th floor, they might need extra time during their breaks or extra breaks to bring their animal outside and let it relieve itself. So those kinds of accommodations need to be in place as well. People who use wheelchairs or other mobility devices. People who use wheelchairs have varying disabilities and abilities. So again, we don't want to make any assumptions. Some people can use their arms and hands, and some can walk for short distances. So again, just letting them let you know what they need. Unless the person has asked you to assist or has consented to your offer of help, try not to touch or push the wheelchair. It's part of their personal space. Keep ramps and doors accessible, unblocked from barriers such as snow or other things. Sometimes we kind of walk in the door and kind of drop things right there. Just being really aware of keeping spaces accessible, which is just a good practice really anyway. When talking with a person who uses a wheelchair, you want to get a chair that allows you to sit at their level, if that's possible, or stand back at a slight distance so that they don't have to strain their neck to look up to you. It also is kind of a weird power dynamic, especially if you're in a position of power, that you're like standing over someone, right? It kind of makes people uneasy in general. So you just want to make sure we're standing far enough back. We want to ask before offering any help again, and even with good intentions, pushing open a door from behind or unexpectedly opening a door may cause a person with a mobility issue to fall. Some people who have limited mobility actually may lean on the door for support. Other people may have issues with their grip, for example, so they just need an extra minute to get their hand to release the door. And so sometimes when we pull or push a door, it may actually hinder their ability to access it. And just again, never grabbing a mobility device unless asked. People with non-visible disabilities, we've talked about a few of them, but not all disabilities are visible. A person may make a request or behave in a way that seems strange to you, and you may not understand why. Their requests or behavior may be disability related. I can't tell you how many times I've had an employer say, oh, well, just talking to this person, you wouldn't know that they have a disability. That's actually really, like, we want to get away from, again, making those assumptions and thinking that people have to be a certain way or are a certain way when they have a disability. For example, you may give someone simple verbal directions, which you feel are really easy to follow, but the person may ask you to write down that information. This person may have a learning disability or a hearing impairment that makes it easier to understand written communication. I've also had situations where people, written communication isn't the best for them and they need pictures or visual cues. I've had clients where if they have 5 things they have to do, we take a picture of each task that they have to complete, and that's much easier for them. So these are really simple accommodations, and we don't want to make any assumptions about anybody, especially with things like this, because it's just so simple to accommodate, right? People who look different. A different issue confronts people who may not be limited in their daily activities, but who are treated as if they have a disability because of their appearance. For example, people with facial differences, cleft lips, or skin conditions often find others staring at them or looking away and also treating them differently. Just be sure not to contribute to stigmatizing or discriminating against people who look different. We're having these conversations because we all want to be the change makers in society, right? And we want to do the right thing that's inclusive and respectful for everyone. Persons of short stature. There are actually 200 diagnosed types of growth-related disorders that result in short stature or dwarfism. For an adult, being treated as cute or childlike because of their height is a really tough obstacle, especially in the professional world. Communication may be easier when people are at the same level. So persons of short stature have different preferences. Some people prefer something to stand on, or they like to have something to rest their feet on and have their chair high, so they're sitting at the same level as other people. Some people may prefer that you sit or kneel at their level, or that you stand back again in order to make eye contact without them needing to kind of look up at you. Again, just asking the person's preference is the best practice here. People with speech-related disabilities, people who use a voice prosthesis or are deaf, have a stammer, or who have had a stroke or a brain injury are sometimes difficult to understand. We want to try to not finish their sentences or fill in their words. Just be patient. And if you have trouble understanding them, they're very used to it. So don't just nod. You want to politely ask them just to repeat what they said. Again, they're going to be very used to this request. In most cases, the person won't mind and they'll actually appreciate your efforts to understand them because they're probably dismissed a lot of the time. If you're not sure whether you've understood, you can try repeating their remarks back to them. If you still can't understand them, ask for another way to communicate. Can we write that down, for example? Just remembering to be really patient and kind, as they are doing their best, and it's very frustrating. So just a few more general things to keep in mind. I'll reiterate. Many people with disabilities dislike terms like physically challenged or differently abled. If you're unclear about what term to use, just ask. This is one that I actually get a lot. It is generally okay for most people with disabilities to use common terms. For example, a visually impaired person is able to see your point. Or you can go for a walk with a person in a wheelchair, right? So those kinds of, just general things that we say in society, most people are okay with those. And this is a really big one. A wheelchair is what the person uses to get around and participate in society. It's not confining, it's actually liberating for them. It's allowing them to participate in society. So we want to remember to kind of keep any of those negative associations out of our thoughts and actions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to be an effective leader, because we're all here because we want to be better leaders. We want to be more inclusive. Among many other skills, inclusivity is a skill that all leaders need to have. While diversity refers to the makeup of a team, inclusion is how the members of that team feel at work. Your team may be diverse, but if the members do not feel safe, welcome, and valued, they will find it difficult to commit or contribute fully. That's why leaders need to embrace diversity and foster inclusion on their teams. True leaders unite and motivate their team with accountability, effective communication, and empowerment techniques. And you'll see on the right, I've included, this is actually a really old study. It's from 2004, but the article that I got it from had a lot more recent information. It's just basically saying that the top performing teams give more than 5 positive comments for every criticism. And this is just good for all leaders and all teams, regardless of disability or whatever. Just to remember that giving more positive reinforcement, most people are going to react to that in a better way than criticism. And while criticism is important, remember, it's not saying don't give any criticism. It's just saying for every criticism, give 5 times as many positive comments. And that's a great way to motivate your team. In the same study that I got that information from, the following 6 traits were found among the participants that were studied to be inclusive traits for leaders. So commitment, they're committed to creating an inclusive environment and understanding that their team culture starts with them. I think the most important thing as a leader is that everyone's looking up to you to model that behavior. Courage, they challenge historical attitudes and are not afraid to admit personal blind spots and the need for further education. It's really important to recognize our own intersections and our own blind spots because of family of origin or our culture or whatever. You don't know what you don't know, and it's okay to be like, this is a blind spot for me, but I'm going to learn more about it because I want to make this person feel more welcome at work. The same goes for recognizing biases. We all have them. It's just part of being human to have a bias. If you discount the fact that you have a bias, that's even worse. It's okay to just say, this is a bias for me, and actively seek ways to overcome them so that they don't influence your decisions. Openness, inclusive leaders seek out and welcome the perspective of others, knowing it can make an idea, project, or team stronger and help to mitigate any personal blind spots. So the more that we listen to what people have to say, the more we're going to learn about what their needs are. Cultural intelligence. Inclusive leaders are educated on cultural norms and regulate their verbal and nonverbal language to make everyone feel included. And collaborative, they create a workplace where individuals feel safe and empowered to share their ideas with others, even if they're different from the majority. So I want to talk about a few more kind of inclusive leadership techniques, something that we call a strengths-based approach. And I'm going to talk a little bit about job carving and customization for people with disabilities. So a strength-based approach is all about looking at what your individual employees are good at and kind of getting them to do the duties that they're best at and that they enjoy the most. Kind of makes sense. So we want to ask employees what skills they have, where they want more support to improve skills they feel like they aren't as good at, how they like to be supported, where they see themselves within the organization, and where they want to go with their career. We want to work according to strengths. So know the strengths of your employees and how to be most effective at utilizing different skills, and allow your employees to work in the areas that they're best suited for and enjoy the most. There's tons of studies to suggest that when people are doing something that they like, and that they feel that they're good at, they're just much better at it. And so we want to try to fill in the gaps in our team in those areas where people have said, I'm not so great at this, I need support with this. So job carving is something that a lot of employment specialists do to kind of help these people with really specialized roles, usually management. They identify non-specialized tasks that these specialized employees perform and create a new non-specialized role for another person. So they create a new tailored job description that fits a specific employee's skills and strengths. And this allows more people to collaborate based on areas of expertise and interest. Job customization or carving is a term for customizing job duties, and it's a way of combining tasks from different jobs to increase employee productivity while capitalizing on the skills and strengths of workers who identify as people with disabilities. Job carving is about creating a new position by freeing specialized employees from having to perform specialized tasks. It increases the specialized employees' productivity, enhances company profitability and service delivery. So for example, managers often have a lot of smaller tasks they need to do that are not their core duties. Some of those could be delegated to a new employee. These jobs are often great for persons with disabilities and can easily be accommodated and modified for specific skills and strengths of the individual. Service providers like ILNS and YMCA are really great at helping with this as well. So definitely tap into those resources if you're interested in learning more about that. So as with everything, there are consequences of not being inclusive. So high turnover is one of them. Employees who don't feel happy and valued are more likely to leave your organization. If someone feels like if they ask for an accommodation, it would probably be denied, they'll probably just quit instead. So you're going to have a lot of turnover, and the cost of hiring new employees frequently is more expensive than accommodating current employees. This is just a fact. We talked about accommodations and how little they really do cost in reality. So even at the top end of an accommodation costing, let's say $500 for a chair and a desk for someone, it's going to cost you more in time and resources and job ads and interviewing and all of that stuff to hire someone new. Undue stress, the workplace will be negative, morale will be low, and productivity will decrease. You're also missing opportunities by not being inclusive. We talked about the over 500,000 people with disabilities in Canada who are able to work and can't get into the market for whatever reason. So that's a huge untapped labor market. And there's also going to be a lack of younger workers who are looking for a more progressive workplace. I'm a millennial, and I can say that my generation and the generations under me are definitely looking for a progressive and inclusive workplace where these accommodations will be given to them. You'll also have a lack of diversity in perspective and ideas. Without those younger folks. So you can see the picture on the right, there's lots of pictures out there about inclusive workplaces, but there are older folks, there are younger folks, there are people of color, people with disabilities. That's really what we mean by diversity and inclusion. And in an inability to adapt to the changing workplace culture. So as these younger generations especially become more in the workplace and the older generations are retiring, they are looking for these progressive workplaces. Organizations that don't adapt will have a harder and harder time finding workers as this next generation enters the workforce. So we want to make sure that we're staying current and adaptable in our policies to make sure we're getting the best people we can. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how inclusive your organization is. So My organization takes steps to build an inclusive workplace. So some of the things that I've talked about, are you implementing those things? My organization provides flexibility regarding when, where, and how people work. We talked about that being the number one accommodation that folks are asking for. Can I work from home once or twice a week to make my life more manageable? Can I take a 2-hour break in the afternoon and go to the doctor and work later in the evening, etc.? Can I work a 4-day work week? These are the kinds of things that really folks are needing for accommodations, and they're very easy and they're free to implement. We have appropriate physical spaces for the needs of each worker and their job. So you have an employee that's like, I really want to get this report done and I just need a private space. Do you have that available? Can people listen to headphones if they work independently? Things like that. My organization takes steps to create a work environment free of stigma and discrimination. Again, this is looking to leadership and policies. We talked a lot about how to have inclusive policies. That's a great way to start. My organization lets workers share opinions and contribute to decision making. Again, nothing about us without us. My organization provides opportunities for peer support and collaboration, like peer support initiatives, team building activities, and work recognition events. There are a lot of people who will complain about team building activities and trust exercises and all that stuff, but they really do work to make a more cohesive team. And work recognition events are proven to increase effectiveness, efficiency, and morale in your organization. People love to be recognized for what they're doing well. And again, remembering that we want to give 5 times as much praise for every criticism. Really acknowledging when people are doing a great job goes really far. My organization actively facilitates respectful and non-judgmental discussions about mental health in the workplace. If you have employees who are struggling with their mental health, be open to those conversations. It's probably not just one person. It's becoming more and more common, and we need to be able to talk about these things in order to advance as society. My organization ensures that all team members demonstrate civility in their workplace interactions. So just making sure, we're not at work to meet our best friends, but we do have to be professional and work together collaboratively in a positive way. And my organization effectively resolves workplace conflict while preserving the respect and dignity of all participants. These ones are more specific to mental illness and disability, but my organization refers employees who are living with mental illness to appropriate resources in our organization or community. If you don't have like an employee assistance program or benefits or anything, we want to make sure that people are still feeling supported. There is the Nova Scotia Mental Health crisis line, and there's also a line that you can text now. These are good resources just to have up in your lunchroom if people need to access those and they don't necessarily want to talk about them. Just letting people know that you do care about their mental health and that there are resources available that they can access. My organization supports the needs of employees living with disabilities, especially mental health issues, who are trying to be productive at work. So if you walk into someone's office and they seem to be having a really bad day, instead of just ignoring the problem or being like, oh, that person isn't working because I saw them in their office, like taking a break or whatever. We want to try to, again, like stay away from these negative associations. Just ask the person if there's anything that you can do to help them, if they need a break or if there's anything that they need. My organization gives employees the support, skills, and resources they need to meet the psychological and emotional demands of their job. So there are a lot of stressful jobs out there. I think most of us would agree that when we're at work, we're pretty busy. That's the point, right? But we want to make sure that we're constantly assessing the demands of the job and making sure that our employees are feeling supported and that they have resources they can access, including management. How accessible are you if someone's like, you just put me on that project, but I have so much other stuff going on right now and I need another team member to support me. My organization regularly monitors team workload demands and makes adjustments as needed. So don't wait for them to come to you. Take a look and see how hard everyone's working and if you can allocate some more resources to support them. My organization ensures that mental and emotional effort required to do the work is reasonable. We want to make sure that we're not asking too much of people, more than they can handle. My organization responds in effective and timely ways to any potential risks to employees' psychological safety, and addresses psychological impact of workplace bullying, harassment, or unresolved conflicts with workers. Now, this is the stuff that we all hate dealing with, and we kind of want to let people work things out on their own. But we want to make sure that we are limiting and assessing the impact that anything like this may happen when it occurs. My organization recognizes and addresses the psychological impact of illness, accidents, and injuries on all workers. It's not just the injured worker or the person who's off work that it affects, it's their team who's now picking up that extra work, or who genuinely care about their coworker and are concerned for their health. The people in my organization are comfortable when employees share their emotional or personal concerns. Obviously, we want to be professional at work and we want to be our professional selves, but we all do have things in our personal lives which are going to affect our work from time to time. And it's better to be able to talk about those things than to ignore that they exist, because people may need support. My organization addresses any work-related fears or concerns an employee may have. My organization effectively supports employees during times of crisis at work. When employees have a conflict between work and personal demands, my organization supports them in finding an effective solution. People are going to have things in their personal life that come up and are going to affect work. And it's not like they want these things to be causing a problem, but they just do. Sometimes life just gets in the way, and it's good to just work together and find a solution that feels fair to the organization and to the person. Employees can easily access support within my organization. So that's support groups, information about where they can access support in the community, and also just support from other employees and from management. My organization has standards and guidelines for respectful communication. All employees in my organization have access to benefits such as sick days. We talked about that one. Employees take their entitled breaks and time off, example, lunch breaks and vacation time. So just making sure that people are feeling rested and recharged. My organization provides individual accommodations and support as needed. My organization keeps employees up to date when there are proposed or actual changes in processes, policies, etc. And lastly, my organization holds all team members accountable for every instance of inappropriate workplace conduct. I know that was a lot. So just ask yourself, how inclusive is your organization? Staying current and being adaptable and inclusive improves the world for everyone. And thank you so much. We are always looking for inclusive employers to partner with as an organization for our youth employment programs. So if you have positions available or you're interested in partnering with us, please do reach out.